Welcome to the Foundery, where leaders are forged daily. And now your host, George Roberts.
Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today we have Jerome Myers, Chief Inspiration Officer at Dreamcatchers. Welcome, Jerome.
George, so grateful to be here with you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's exciting to have you, and I'd like to start by asking you, who is Jerome Myers?
I'm just a corporate America dropout, man. After building a $20 million division for Fortune 550, I got the opportunity to lay people off 2 years in a row. And I said enough. And so I dropped out of corporate America and thought I was going to go buy an apartment building. I went to the first bank. They said, "Do you have experience?" And I said, "I don't know what that is, but I did have P&L responsibility for this huge business that had 30% profit margins. I got an MBA, I got my engineering license." And they said, "Yeah, that's nice. Do you have experience?" And I said, "Well, what is experience?" And they said, "Well, have you bought a property of similar size and executed that business plan before?" I said, "No, I don't have any of that." He said, "Well, you need that in order for us to lend you money." I was like, "Okay, these folks are crazy. Let me go to another bank." And so after doing that 10 times and getting told the same answer, I realized that I was the one that didn't know what I was doing. See, I didn't go through any formal education for buying real estate. And I thought piecing together podcasts and YouTube videos was the way to get it done. And through the school of hard knocks, I finally figured out how to get in the game, and we can unpack that later. But I'm the guy who felt like I could do it the free way and have massive success. So that's me in a nutshell, George.
I love it. So like many people on this show, you found that you love the world of entrepreneurship more than the world of corporate America.
You know, I think about it a little bit differently, and it may be semantics. I I love freedom. I love the ability not to have to walk around with the mask. I love the concept of being able to be on mission or on purpose every day instead of subject to the whims of delivering value to shareholders. And so that is why I'm outside of the corporate machine. Not so much because I think being an entrepreneur is sexy. In fact, I think being an entrepreneur is pretty hard. It's a lot harder than walking down the beaten path of corporate America, but I think it's worth it because once you experience that freedom, it's really difficult to consider another way of life.
I just love that. Now, one other thing I'd like to draw out from your background, I believe that you played college football before going into corporate America.
Are you ready to build passive income through investing in multifamily real estate? Take the next step by heading to www.horizonmultifamily.com and click Get Started to schedule a call.
Maybe you can tell us some of the lessons that you've learned that you were able to take into leadership and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think the first one is early bird gets the worm. And so I still remember winter workouts where we had to be in the gym at 4:30 and we would work like savages, right? And the coaches were telling us to quit and they were challenging our will, and it helped fortify mental toughness. But it would be really interesting because we would leave that and we'd shower, we'd eat breakfast, we'd go to class and start our days, and other people were having a hard time just getting to their 8 o'clock class. And it was then that I realized that there's this window of time that I call separation season, right? And it happens between the hours of 4 and 8 a.m. on most days, where people are just getting started their days. Those who are willing to rise early, they're able to get a head start, per se, and get done a lot of things that they couldn't get done during the day because nobody else is up to bother them. Nobody else is in the space or in the mindset of reaching out to somebody. And that quiet time really allows them to do deep work that most other folks don't get the opportunity to do.
I just love it. I've been an early riser much of my life, and I just love hearing about these formative experiences. For me, it would be completing a PhD. After that, I'm not giving up on anything. I mean, to go through that much work and not for any expected financial success, uh, nothing after that is going to slow me down.
Yeah, it was funny, man. I had two options coming out of college. I could go start my PhD program down in Florida or go get a job. And since I was the first person in my family to go away to college, my dad finished his degree at night, but while he was in the military, but like I graduated from high school and actually went to college, I thought it would probably be a good idea for me to go and start my career so I could begin the path of building wealth. I was totally bought into the American dream, right? You go to a good school, you get good grades, you get a good job, you have 2.5 kids, a white picket fence, and two dogs. And in doing that, you have an amazing life. The part that I didn't really get though was the working for 40 or 50 years and retiring and hoping that your money didn't run out before you passed away.
I'm telling you, there's a lot in there. And I wish that I could disperse both entrepreneurial as well as financial knowledge more widely. I hope this podcast does that. But speaking of podcasts, you have a great podcast, and I love the concept. There are so many podcasts about, financial freedom or cash flow, but you focus on multifamily missteps, if I remember correctly. And I like the idea of focusing on missteps because, as I like to say, education is that's really the cheapest experience you're going to get is learning from other people's experiences. So maybe you can walk us through your podcast, the setup, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so if we go back to me trying to figure out how to get into the space by listening to podcasts, what was available to me was a bunch of success stories. Everybody made money all the time. They always closed their deals, and their deals always exited for big multiples, and they didn't have any operational issues because you just throw it over the fence to the property manager and they take care of everything. And I had this 23 unit that we closed on as our first deal, and it was a cluster, right? And I'm sitting here questioning, like, how incompetent am I? Because this is happening, that's happening, and I didn't hear about any of that stuff. And then as my brand grew and I got introduced to more people who were actually operators in the business, I learned that there's a whole nother side of podcasts. And it's not something that's touted, right? But there are war stories, there are battle scars. And if you're an operator and you've proven yourself, you've got at least one. And if you don't have one, then dum dum dum, you probably aren't really an operator. And so I wanted to share those stories because, to your point, there was no reason for me to make a mistake and then George go make the same mistake. That's just ludicrous, right? If you can take advantage of my misstep and make a different one that's more complicated, higher up the spectrum, then in concept, we can elevate the collective knowledge of all the multifamily investors, which is good for everybody. Because I think a rising tide will raise all those boats.
Yeah, I just love it. Maybe this would be a great place to pick up your story. So the first thing is you had trouble financing your apartment purchases, and then not having that W-2 income, that's huge. And you had to overcome the experience. So how did you do that?
It's funny. I break it down and I did it out of order. And this is why I tell people to do it in a different order. So you need knowledge, deal flow, experience, and capital. And I think you need them in that order. If you're trying to get capital, but you don't have experience on your team or deal flow, you don't need the capital. If you don't have any deal flow, you don't need an experienced partner. If you don't have knowledge, you have no idea what a deal is. And there's a bunch of leads and deals, brokers that send you stuff all day. It doesn't mean that you actually have a chance to make money. And I don't actually understand why people buy real estate if they can't make money with it. So what I really believe should happen is the person gets them formal education. And I call it formal. I want people to get a framework that goes end to end that tells them what it's going to take to run their building. Because you got to put a business plan together, right? You want to go in and operate this thing, execute a strategy in order to increase the net operating income. And the quicker that you can explain that to somebody who's giving you money or partnering with you, it'll accelerate the trust curve dramatically. And so my game is to help people figure out how to do that and do it as quickly as possible. Because if you try to get capital and you don't have a deal, the capital is looking at you like, why are you talking to me? I don't know what we're talking about. And the majority of our decisions are going to be based on the quality of the asset.
Yeah, that is a huge lesson. When you're in the commercial space, the property matters so much more than in residential.
Without question. And I think the thing that most people who are making that transition don't realize is you can buy a multifamily asset, have no W-2 income, because I didn't, right? As long as somebody on your team has the ability to show the net worth and liquidity for the deal. And so, when I went to the bank and I said, hey, throw me $1 million to go buy this 23-unit building, and they told me no. And I was like, well, I got money in the bank, I got a credit score. And it was like, yeah, that's not enough. You have to have the liquidity post-close. You have to have net worth that's equal to the amount of the loan. And the best thing that you can do in order to get this accomplished is go get a partner. Well, the issue was, George, my dad was a soldier. My mom stayed at home with me the majority of the time. I didn't have any people with multi-million-dollar real estate portfolios coming to hang out at the cookout, right? And so I went to a university, and me and my buddy are sitting on the stoop, and we're asking the question. After doing a little bit of math, we realized that the guy that owned our complex was making $700,000 a year, and we never saw him or talked to him. Now, it's top line revenue. It wasn't his net operating income, but still a big number for us. It's like, man, what if we could get a piece of that? We don't need 700,000. Maybe if we could get 70. And so from sitting on the stoop as a sophomore in college till after I left corporate America, I still hadn't found anybody that was investing in apartments. And so I flipped into fix and flip because I felt like, well, at least I'll still be in real estate. And I've been doing some hard money lending, so I had exposure to the asset class, and I understood the strategy of how you actually buy these things and what it took in order to get out. And in that, I was sitting on the stoop. I still remember the day, man. I'm sitting on the stoop of this 1920s build. It was a $90,000 rehab. And we're getting to the tail end of it. And a guy pulls up in a white Dodge Ram. He hops out. He says, hey, bud, I want to check out the finishes in your house. We're getting ready to do a project down the street. And he comes in, and, I poke out my chest because this is the first time somebody wanted to come see one of my projects. And we're walking through. He's like, man, you took the wall out. The gooseneck sink in the island is amazing. We go upstairs, like, man, I really like this tile in the bathroom. Coming down, getting ready to walk out. He stops in the threshold and he says, hey, do you know anything about that building behind the Chimbo Mart? I said, the 23-unit apartment building? He said, yeah. I said, absolutely. I tried to buy that 4 or 5 months ago. He looked at me. He said, well, I'm going to make an offer on it this afternoon. I said, you're the guy I've been looking for. The bank told me I needed an experienced partner. You're not making this offer unless you already own real estate, right? You got apartments. He's like, yeah, we own a little something. I said, don't leave me out of the deal. He looked at me and he said, what you going to bring to the table? I said, look, man, it doesn't matter. Don't leave me out of the deal. I've been looking for you. The banks told me I needed an experienced partner. And he looked at me and he said, what are you going to bring to the table? And I said, I don't know. We'll figure that out. Just don't leave me out of this deal. And he stepped back, he sighed, and he walked away. And I was like, all right, I know he's going to call me. So he's walking down through the grass, hops in his truck, drives off. And I'm like, yes, it's finally happened. I'm going to be rewarded for being faithful and diligent. And this was on a Wednesday. Friday came, still no call. I was like, oh man, they just negotiated through the weekend. He'll call me on Monday. Nothing. The whole week goes by. And about Thursday, I realized I didn't even give the guy my phone number. Coming around to the next week, I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't believe I missed out on this thing. And then Tuesday comes and a guy that I used to lend money to says, hey man, I got an opportunity to be a general contractor on this project. The one that you and I talked about back in January, February. I told them that I'm only comfortable doing it if you're a part of the deal. And I was like, man, this is outstanding.
Right? This is absolutely amazing. And so I asked, when are we going to meet? He said, tomorrow. I'm there. Just tell me the time and the place. And so the three of us, and then we added in the broker and the property manager. We bought this property, and the collective was able to meet all the requirements of the bank. And that is how I got into my first deal. I was fortunate enough to sit as asset manager on that deal. And, you know, we've done really well. We've taken rents from $695 to $1295 at that property.
And did that require some heavy repositioning? Were you doing a lot of reno?
A ton of reno, George. We added central HVAC. We jackhammered the slab floor and added a half bathroom on the first floor. We did recessed lighting. It was townhouse units. We tucked the wall out between the kitchen and the living room. All new tile upstairs in the bathroom. You name it. New roof, new siding, new parking lot, landscaping. We did everything, man.
So that's awesome. I just love it. And you must have learned just a ton on that. So this is the 23 unit you mentioned earlier, where a lot of things went wrong, right? So maybe you could walk us through a few of those things and how you were able to surmount those hurdles.
Oh my gosh, where do I start? I guess my favorite one would be half of the units had central HVAC. The other half didn't. Well, the HVAC units had the bar cages on them. So it was just 4 bars. So somebody couldn't pick up the outdoor unit and load it in the back of their truck. So we decided, it wasn't an original business plan. We deviated from the original business plan and we took occupancy at the property down to 0.
Oh.
While there was no occupancy on the property, people would come in and take apart the housing for the outdoor units, steal all the insides out, and leave the metal there. And so all of those were gone. All of our outdoor HVAC units were gone. They were the old style, so we had to replace the indoor and the outdoor unit. Dramatically increased our costs. Second one, we didn't work on permitting until after we closed. We went back and forth with the city on a bunch of different issues. It took us months and months and months in order to get our permits. We pulled a new sewer line in because when we added the washer and dryers on the first floor and we added in the half bath on the first floor, we needed to upgrade our main sewer pipe because the flow was increased. Well, we didn't get that approved by the city before we did it. They made us pull it out and put a new one in.
Wow.
And that one's my favorite because it was a smooth 30,000.
So that's an amazing story, but obviously you learned through it. Did you make a lot of money on the first deal? I mean, you said you nearly doubled the rents. So it sounds like in the end, it was probably a pretty decent thing.
Yeah, we actually still hold it, but yeah, we're going to do very well on that.
Love it. Now, what market are you in, or what market was this in? And then what markets are you in now?
Yeah, so that deal is in Greensboro or in Richmond, Virginia. And what we buy today is in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Okay, cool. You want to tell us how you chose Greensboro?
So I like to buy in my own backyard, right or wrong. And it just so happens that the Triad is, the 3rd largest MSA in the state of North Carolina. And we're having more rapid rent growth than Charlotte, and Raleigh, which are the two that are larger than us. It is a market where price per door is reasonably low in comparing it to other things in the marketplace. And so for us, we just think it is an amazing aggregation of all of the right buying factors, including job growth.
Awesome. And then one other thing that I know about your approach is that you favor joint ventures. This is a business where everybody talks about syndication, syndication, syndication. So tell us why you chose a different path.
Yeah, I think the first thing is, well, I didn't go through one of the programs, right? And so it's really difficult to compete with a group of people who have partnered with investors from all over the country to buy 100 unit plus assets in appreciating markets across the country, right? That's the line that you get told to tell brokers when you come into a new market. And I just feel like, and I've watched people buy smaller properties, get bigger percentage returns, and be able to roll that over and over again without the requirement of maximizing returns to shareholders, right? If you go back to what I consider to be a traumatic experience for me, I didn't want to be in a space where I'm making money and I've got to balance the budget by laying folks off. Like that for me just didn't make a lot of sense. And so I wanted to be in a privately held business, right, where we got to make the decisions as a group versus saying, all right, well, our responsibilities to our limited partners, how can we maximize the return that we get for them?
I love it. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, like not having the shareholders or the limited partners in this case helps. Like when something goes wrong, like somebody steals all your air conditioning units, uh, steals out the copper or whatever. I mean, you can recover from these errors or missteps a lot easier, I think. Or you had to take the occupancy down to zero, right? That was not in the original business plan. That if that's the right thing to do, you don't have to explain that to a large number of people. You can just pivot if you have to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's been extremely beneficial for us through COVID, right? There have been opportunities for us to be more understanding with residents who have been impacted because our partnership says, yeah, it makes sense, versus having to explain why our limited partners aren't getting their distribution this month or this quarter or however the person decides to send checks out to the folks who've put money into their deal.
Yeah, awesome. I love the idea of having a larger portion of something smaller could definitely be a great way to simplify life. But apart from this, so you mentioned a little bit about your motivations as an entrepreneur. It's not so much that you didn't, well, there's certain things you didn't like about the corporate America. You didn't like to have to lay people off. That was no fun. But you mentioned that entrepreneurship is a lot harder. I'll second that. So what lights your fire as an entrepreneur? What keeps you going?
Yeah, and I think the biggest piece of it for me is really related to the ability to see transformation, right? And we do that in two ways. We do some one-on-one coaching with folks, and we also do that with our communities. We don't buy communities that are already renovated, right? We're the folks that come in and we want to be the change agents. And the ability to have a vision of what something can be or could be and then implement that and see the back end of it is extremely exciting.
I love it. It's amazing just to see the sorts of transformations that you can find. And it always just strikes me how if there weren't people coming in and renovating these properties, they'd all go down to zero occupancy. They'd be rubble before you know it. And it's very important, very important. So along the way, and obviously you've been a corporate leader too, what's the most important lesson in leadership?
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I was the guy who got the reputation for caring too much. I was challenged on whether or not I could make tough decisions because of how much I cared about the folks that were on my team. And I didn't really consider the people decisions tough decisions. What I consider the tough decisions is when we put profits before people.
And then maybe you could tell us about some of the books that have helped to forge you as a leader and as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think the most important book that I've read since I've been an entrepreneur is Sizing People Up by Robin Dreek. And it's all about the establishment of trust and the indicators on who to trust and who not to. I am a generally trusting person who believes that people are out to make my life better because that's the way that I approach life. And I find out the hard way that that's not the truth, especially in entrepreneurship. And so, because I liked somebody, I immediately went to the place where I thought I should trust them. And those two things are not synonymous. There is a what I'll call a funnel. There's people who know you, there are people who like you, and then there's people who trust you. And I was condensing the bottom two pieces of that funnel. And what I found is trust means that you can predict what a person is going to do. Liking them has nothing to do with your ability to predict what they're going to do. And that ability to predict what they're going to do allows you to plan how to engage or interact with them. And so that book was transformational for me. It allowed me to get some people out of my world who were there to take advantage of me. And it allows me to have more discernment because I realized pretty quickly I was weak at that. I mean, I've lost thousands and thousands of dollars. I guess it would be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars because of poor choices on who I thought was a good person. On the other side of that, when I think about corporate, I think I would have to go to, John Maxwell. He's wrote a tremendous amount of books, right? But I think Everyone Communicates But Few Connects is probably my favorite one out of his collection. And the importance of being able to communicate your vision is more important than actually having a vision. And that may sound silly, but at the end of the day, you can have all the visions you want. If you can't enroll anybody in them, they will simply be great ideas and never actually manifest in reality. So, the ability to figure out how to get your message across to those who will be supporters of it is, I think, paramount for any leader in a large organization.
So those are two great books. I think I'd like to check out. Those are not ones that I've heard mentioned before, and definitely have to add those to my reading list. What about advice for your younger self?
Yeah, I was silly, man. I thought that the money that I was making in corporate America was a reason why I shouldn't go be an entrepreneur. I thought that the pain of going to zero potentially in income was something that I couldn't overcome. And what I would tell them with that as context, and what I would tell little Jerome is do it now because you building somebody else's business is not going to feed you later. It's great to have a salary, but if you can build your own business and grow it to the point where it doesn't need you, it can feed you for the rest of your life. And I've watched other successful multifamily investors do that. And, my favorite example is Dan Hanford. Dan built multiple businesses. He started when he was in college, and then he transitioned a lot of that wealth over into multifamily and scaled not only multifamily investor nation, but also self storage investor nation. And the ability to not need that income from his apartment business because the other businesses are working gives him tremendous autonomy in the way that they handle um, that new business, and their ability to reinvest has allowed them to scale at a pace I think most people would consider blistering.
Yeah, amazing story. Just love the story of Dan Hanford. You can tell he was a little different than the other chiropractic students when he decided that he was going to figure out how he could get those spinal models and skeletal models cheaper than the bookstore did. So amazing story. Just love the story of Dan Hanford. And he does have an amazing conference twice each year. I understand you've got a conference coming up. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I shout Dan out because I speak at his conference every time he has it. So I don't know if I've been on five, I don't know if it's 4, 5, 6 times, but it's exciting. So I'll be hanging out with Dan in a few weeks. And then, yeah, I started a conference called the Mid-Atlantic Multifamily Investing Conference. And that'll be happening February 18th through the 20th of 2020. And that's virtual. And then later this year, we're also going to put together an in-person event. George, your audience is going to be the first to hear that. Nobody's heard that, but we're going to put together a second conference this year, and it's going to be in person. But we're absolutely excited, extremely excited about the Mid-Atlantic Multifamily Investing Conference that's happening February 18th through the 20th of 2022.
All right, great. And where do people go to learn more about that?
Yeah, they can hop over to myersmethods.com/win 2022.
All right. I love it. I love to see these in-person events, particularly. So I'd love to check out that second event when that comes around.
Awesome.
All right. Well, a couple quick things here. You did mention about growing other people's businesses. Now you've got people growing your business. Tell us about who you've got working for you, including maybe any virtual assistants and anything you've learned about employing that phase of your business productively.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? We've got multiple podcasts. We've got 2 podcasts that come out on a weekly basis. We've got YouTube channels. We've got multiple social medias. We've got email. We got all of this kind of back office stuff that we have going on. And we've got a team around the world who's helping us execute against that, right? And it's allowing me to really focus on the 2 things I'm really good at. One is finding deals, and the other is helping other people realize their dreams. And so, my back office team handles all of the content creation and a lot of the distribution on the kind of marketing or branding side of the house. And then they help with things that aren't really customer facing as well. And it's funny, I was on with one of the young ladies that helps me this morning, and we changed up her bio and profile, and it was just really cool for her to really begin to take ownership of the role that she sits in because she's our operations manager.
Awesome. Well, any questions you'd like to ask me?
Yeah, man. How'd you get your podcast so popular? I mean, I saw your LinkedIn post. It's like 1,000 downloads in like 2 days. Like, what's going on with that? What's the secret?
Right. So a couple of phases to that. I asked people who were doing really great work. I reached out to Susie Sevier, and she taught me a lot. Like, oh man, you got to get audiograms for your podcast. You got to get on Instagram. And I'm thinking like, oh man, I got an Instagram account someplace. And so she taught me how to just hit everything from every angle, make sure that you promote every episode in a big way. And then the other half of it is really just getting the guests to promote the episode. And Bo Beery, which is the episode you're referring to, is a master of that. He's not only blasting everything that I have out to his amazing social network, but he actually asked me for the original file so that he could cut out additional clips and send those to his social network. So that's basically the 2 halves of it. I mean, you've got to build your social network, you got to blast everything out, and then you got to get those great guests and get them to blast it out. So whenever I get somebody who does do that, I greatly appreciate it. And then you get these guests that don't even give a thumbs up to the post that you put out. And I'm thinking like, what the heck, man? It only takes a second. So I guess there's a big lesson in there, both for running a podcast as well as being a guest on a podcast. Definitely want to blast it out, and you want to get the maximum value that you can out of it. So yeah, he got over 1,000 in about 72 hours. What a guy. Bo Beery is just amazing. So hopefully we're going to see this be the next episode that hits 1,000 downloads. And I know that you've got an amazing social network out there, Jerome, and we'll hopefully hit that mark and go beyond.
Yeah, we're gonna push the button, man. Every time I come on somebody's show, I want to be in the top 2 or 3 downloaded episodes. I can't. I used to say I always want to be number 1, but there's some folks out there bringing some fire, man. So if I can be in the top 3, I know I'll be able to get to hang out with some really cool guests or really cool hosts. And we absolutely enjoy promoting other people's shows because I know what it's like getting started and trying to figure it out. And I know what it's like to have the big name come on your show and they don't even acknowledge that they were on your show. At times it's heartbreaking because it's a labor of love in the beginning, man. Nothing's really happening, and you wonder if anybody's listening, and then you get that first email. And I'm only saying this to encourage folks. I know you've already been through. You get that first email, man. Your podcast is helping change my life. Right? When that happens, it's totally worth it. So love it, man. We're going to get it out for sure.
Thank you so much, Jerome, for helping people to catch their dreams. Thanks for bringing the fire to this podcast. Amazing episode.
Thanks for having me, George.